Good afternoon and welcome to NABS Fireside Chat with Chris Hayward, who is one of Adlan's most senior names and one of our most vocal advocates for mental health. NABS is a support organisation for the advertising and media industry, and we help thousands of people each year with their emotional and their mental health. Like Chris, we believe that we all need to talk more about our mental health and to find ways to support it. Chris is a force to be reckoned with. Campaign magazine once named him their #1 media buyer in the UK. He's on first name terms with senior leaders of our biggest brands and broadcasters. He has a happy family life, friends and sporting interests. But none of this made Chris immune to serious mental health challenges following an accident that changed his life forever. In today's chat, Chris is going to explain how he went from being at the top of his game to his lowest ebb, and how he sought help to reclaim the life that he enjoys today. Now, today's talk comes with a content warning. We're going to discuss suicide and other strong themes. Chris is going to be very open and very honest about his mental health journey, with a view to encouraging you to talk about and support your own mental health, and to recognise any warning signs in your colleagues and the people around you. Now, we're holding this fireside chat to mark Men's Health Week, but of course, mental health is an important issue for the whole year round. So if you need help with any of the issues raised today, please get in touch with NABS. We are here to support you whenever you need. I'm very excited to talk to Chris. Chris, this is brilliant. You have been so beautifully open about your mental health journey, and it's a real privilege to have you with us today to talk about the ins and outs of where you've been and how you've got to where you are today. So thank you.
Thanks, Louise,
for joining us.
That was quite an introduction, I have to say.
Well, yes, I do like to give a good introduction, but you're going to more than live up to it. Now, why don't we set the scene? What was your mental health like before the accident that changed your life?
I suppose that I consider my mental health to be fairly robust before I had my accident and then the incident. I was in a senior position in media buying, and I think that people who work in advertising will immediately recognise what the characteristics of that is. Pretty aggressive, pretty confident. Very focused, and the fact that I was able to do that and keep my physical well-being up as well. I did a lot of running. I really would have thought, and I don't want to say it in a boastful way, but I would have thought I was at the top of my game, really. Very happy family life, very successful professional life, physically in a good place.
So then what happened? You had this accident, which is a freak accident, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had an accident which, you couldn't believe the odds against it. I was coming home from a gig. I had not partaken of any alcohol because it was in a place called the Union Chapel in, I think it's in Islington.
In Islington, yeah.
Yeah, and I basically fell down a dip in the road. Because I was walking along and hadn't seen the dip, I crashed full on to my knees, and when I came to stand up, I couldn't because I'd managed to rupture both the tendons in my knees, which meant that my legs were flapping below me. So that was pretty significant. I hadn't really. When that happens to you, you think, oh, well, this is not ideal. You kind of equate it to having a broken leg or something like that. What I hadn't envisaged was the fact that I couldn't walk. I had to stay in bed for 3 months, essentially, with my legs straight, and then gradually reintroduce some flexibility and learn to walk again. I really would not have envisaged such a life-changing experience from something which essentially was pretty trivial, but it changed my life substantially after that.
So you have this dramatic accident and you go from being Mr. Super Sporty to not being able to leave your bed for a few months. And then this leads to some mental health challenges. So when did you start to experience those, and what did that look like for you?
What it looked like for me was, I actually thought that period of immediate recuperation after my accident, I thought was even more on top of the world than before, because I was able to do my job to a large extent from my bedside. And then came the challenge of going back to work. And I really think that with hindsight, that was probably a mistake, because I hadn't really taken on board, and nobody's fault, I touched nobody. I hadn't taken on board how physically demanding my recuperative period was. And so going back to work, I did the normal thing, 2-3 days, built it up. But really, I found that over the course of a number of weeks, I became more tired. But, you probably say, was that a different type of tired than before? I now recognize that with hindsight, it was a significantly different type of tiredness. But then, it came to a head. I had to go into work one day, and I just thought, I can't do this. I actually can't do this. And I walked up and down Tottenham Court Road, and then went through a whole period over the next couple of days of seriously contemplating suicide. And then within that, I fled, and that is the correct word. I fled to Liverpool for a couple of days. Yeah.
So it's got this very dramatic kind of crescendo, but I'm wondering about the point between where you had this different kind of tiredness, but you're still forcing yourself to go into work, and presumably you're putting on a brave face and still trying
absolutely.
to be at top of your game. Were there any other creeping symptoms that you became aware of that led to you feeling, I can't do my job today?
Well, I think it's something that, happy to talk about more fully later, but, the tiredness was there. And then that whole feeling of being useless, like, so I was feeling below par, and then pretty mundane things at work then became almost insurmountable challenges. And it's like, I went from being the best buyer in town to somebody who couldn't make a decision about anything, whether it was about who should take responsibility for that. And I came over the course, it's hard to determine what the period was, but it could have been several days, a couple of weeks, whereby I really thought I was the most useless person professionally in the UK at my job, in my, what I was doing. I went from, let's say, 4 or 5 months before that to thinking, I'm at the top of the game, to being absolutely useless. I can't do anything. I can't even imagine why I got to this position. I've been conning people for 20 years. I'm completely useless. There is no point in me going into work. And which I didn't do, but then it built up to a crescendo where not only was I rubbish at my job, I was somehow responsible for single thing that was going wrong in the world, in the company, in the UK, and it was all my fault. That sounds pretty dramatic, and it almost sounds as if that's not really kind of anybody with any intelligence could think like that, but it is at the time not logical. So, that is the big thing. And, the psychologists will give it a name of catastrophizing everything, your fault, like that. So they would probably, I would say, with hindsight, that tiredness, which is something I'm always on the lookout for now. I call it tiredness of the eyeballs, and it has a very distinct feel. But with that whole feeling of worthlessness, uselessness, and of course it works away at your brain. And when I then started that day, to think about suicide, it wasn't actually to harm myself or any kind of you deserve to suffer. It was to push that away from my mental process, and I've just grown tired over the course of that period of thinking like that. You
So it
know, I
sounds as
found
though
that
that you were.
inescapable.
Sorry, Chris. What were you
Go
going to
on.
say?
No, it's kind of, I felt it was inescapable, if you know what I mean.
So it really sounds as though you were consumed by these increasingly negative thoughts. And I'm wondering whether you spoke about this at that time with your friends and family. You know, you were the Chris about town. You had so many friends in the industry and your family and your social life based at home as well. Were you talking to any of these people, and how was it affecting your relationships?
Well, I didn't talk to anybody about it because, quite honestly, Louise, you know, this is very important now that I help people, if any of this resonates, to distinguish. I thought the tiredness that I was feeling was completely natural, given, you know, the energy expended in their, you know, recovery, and it didn't strike me as strange. And the other thing was that had not crept up over a matter of months. That actually came to the fore. I mean, let's say, for the sake of this chat, a fortnight. You know, things really kind of came up over the course of a fortnight. And so, you know, people, when I've talked to them about it, yes, you could see you'd got withdrawn and all, and this type of thing, and particularly that's probably the thing that would resonate with most people. I'll talk about it later. The tiredness resonates with my family. But, you know, that was through the gift of hindsight. And, you know, given my kind of frame of mind before me, accident, well, I can solve anything, I can still run marathons and all that. You know, it never even occurred to me that this was something that needed any help. Of course, you know, I basically ran away, and then I was found by the police.
That's when you went to Liverpool.
That's when I went to Liverpool. You know, that would be a very strong indication that all was not well.
So when they found you, where were you and what state you in at that point?
When they found me, I was actually in a hotel in Liverpool, and I say it with a wry smile because, you know, my wife to this day says, "Well, I understand your frame of mind, but why did you choose that hotel?" But, you know, I was found that what was my frame of mind. You know, I'd obviously had a real was in a real trough where to contemplate suicide shows that you're not in the happiest frame of mind. But also, I was kind of in a walking jelly where stuff was happening over there, and I was here, and I was not really part of what was going on. I think I've said in a couple of chats that I literally spent 2 days in different bars, basically looking at a pint and with no idea what to do or what I was going to do. You know, when I actually changed hotels, and I did change hotel after the first night, even now, if you said, "Well, what was the purpose of that?" I have no idea. But I was going around in, I would say, like a mental jelly, where people were existing outside of that jelly, and I was stuck somewhere in it. You know, I have to say that when I was found by the police, you know, I can imagine that it was probably not the best task of his day, because, you know, clearly it become apparent to my family that I was not in a good place. But he was absolutely brilliant. This, so, you know, obviously, you know, you're not feeling very well. You know, we found you. I think it'd be a good idea if then you got psychologically checked out. I had to go. I mean, some of this now, Louise, is a bit vague because I was in that jelly, and
Yeah.
I was taken to hospital in Liverpool for a psychiatric assessment. And thankfully, one of my very good friends had driven my wife up to that hospital, and they wanted to commit me there and then, but we talked to the psychiatric nurse, and he did agree that my issues was not with my family. In some cases, it can be. So committing me was never going to do me, good from that point of view in a protective sense. So I was able to go back home, and then my treatment started as a result of a very, very sympathetic locum, and then the process started. But I can only say my wife has been brilliant, throughout the whole business, and I'm very, very pains to not attribute blame to people for the fact that they didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize the kind of person I was, wouldn't have expected that they recognized. But now they know when I'm not having a great day or when anything like that, they are alert to those signs. But I was very, very, very lucky to have, a very good friend who somehow immediately saw the distress, because that's not typical of me, and picked my wife up and said, "We're driving up to Liverpool." And actually, from that moment on, things improved immeasurably.
So how did you find it then, having to open up and go and talk to this fantastic locum who then referred you for treatment, and then you start talking to your family presumably about what you're going through, as well as having your official treatment, to go from a place where you're kind of so in your head and in this jelly to not just acknowledging that you have challenges, but to talk about them? How did you find that?
If I'm very honest, Louise, pretty easy. And even today, this chat I find extremely cathartic. I'm very, very fortunate in as much as I never felt any stigma at all or any shame. And I don't really know why, but I thought from the first conversation with the locum, right to now, that mental condition is as much part of me as, my dodgy knees. So I never had any problem with any of that. And it was I would say it was a blessed relief, because, the locum, well, obviously, my wife and my friend knew that I was not in a good place, and they gave me a very easy time in terms of eat something and, more or less just let me sleep. And when I went to the locum, my wife talked on my behalf, and I nodded my head most of the time while he put me on a bed to talk to him. And from then on in, it became easy to talk about what had happened to me, and I have a very clear idea now of what, for me, are those personal signs of, perhaps not being at the top of my game and feeling a little bit below par. But certainly when I actually started to, I did go to the Priory over the course of 8 weeks. And there, you are in a book with a bunch of people. One thing you are certain about there is you are not alone, because everybody there has to a certain degree be feeling about that feeling of isolation. I'm the only one feeling like that. And there's, you go from group to group to group, and one of the common things is that everybody's got a mental challenge. And
Were you having individual sessions as well as group therapy sessions?
Yeah, the individual and group sessions.
And did you have any medication as well?
I did have some medication at the start, and then it's kind of where you are with yourself. I took antidepressants, depressants for about a month, but I was in constant dialogue with the main man at the Priory at that stage. You know, I found CBT was so helpful in helping me manage my condition that, you know, that I stopped taking the antidepressants. But what I would say, you know, that was because I'd done that with consultation with my with the psychiatrist
Yeah,
there.
and for anyone who doesn't know, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's a modality of therapy, but as Chris says, if that is suitable for you, then that is what you would be prescribed. There are other modalities as well that may be more suitable for you if you're in a different situation. Certainly, you're very enthusiastic about CBT and you found that it worked for you.
I am, yeah. You know, because I now recognise symptoms that the tiredness is the big thing, and as I say, it's a different type of tiredness. And my family now immediately spots it when I've had a day in starting to create that isolated cocoon, and they're very quick to spot it. But CBT is about doing practical things to make sure there is an engagement. You know, and it starts off with, you know, well, they assume that you're in an isolated sense. So next week's task is to make a phone call to a friend you haven't spoken to. Maybe the week after that might be 2 tasks: listen to some music that you like, or, you know, go out and do some exercise, or read a book, or it's basically, you know, doing things that give you pleasure over which you have control.
So how long ago was your experience in the Priory?
With Army now, 7 years. 7 years ago. But, you know, I have to say I found it immensely beneficial. And I think that, you know, what it may be difficult for some people is to talk candidly about where they're at, and, you know, that feeling of, you know, you're obviously going from being on top of the game to being at the bottom of the game. But in a place like that, you are not by yourself. I mean, everybody is feeling some kind of personal either depression or anxiety or something. Everybody sees, you know, life to a certain extent as a challenge. So, you know, I'm very cognizant now. I do listen to stuff about mental well-being, and, you know, take it from that. I personally think that one of the things that people find it very difficult to do if you start on that frame of mind is being kind to yourself.
What does that look like for you, being kind to yourself?
Well, I'll give you last week I found myself starting to go down towards the trough, and, you know, I've got no reason to be doing this. You know, what is it? But then it's like, right, you know, feeling a bit tired, so right, I'm going to, you know, normally I do 4 or 5 cycles a week. Right, we're going to do a couple this week, and we're just going to go to places that you like looking at, you know, Windsor Great Park. So that's something that's nice and easy, and very gentle on yourself. And, you know, right, do you want to read this week? Because I actually take reading pretty seriously. So, no, don't read too much this week. Listen to more music this week. So you don't have to do very complicated things to start giving yourself an easier time. You know, as you feel more relaxed with yourself, that engagement with the family, with friends, you know, that will kind of produce itself naturally. Whereas I found when I'm feeling a slump, you know, I don't see anybody. I'm as miserable as anything. Well, it's quite hard to detect sometimes in a lugubrious scouser, but, you know, there's a difference between, you know, being miserable and being downright depressed.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that you're still on a mental health journey, isn't it? We're not looking at a situation where you had your 8 weeks in the Priory and then everything just disappeared. You're still on the journey of noticing where your mental health is and maybe experiencing that dip that you need to take care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, my son, yeah, all my family's been brilliant, but my wife and daughter are particularly sensitive when they can see me going into that different type of tiredness. And the other thing that I found is obviously I've been very open about, discussing circumstances and stuff, with my friends, including males, thereby, but they won't say, they will talk about, you're all right these days, how do you feel? Do you ever feel, any of those negative thoughts? Uh, and that's not with all my male friends, but that's with some, and I think they're kind of testing me to see not only if I'm in a good place, but also whether they as well. That's interesting. I probably have about, I don't know, 4 or 5. I'm fortunate enough to have loads of friends, but there's probably 4 or 5 of them now and again just check me out with, "You're all right, how's it going? How are you feeling?" And particularly with lockdown, I think that has actually intensified any sense of isolation, and I think some people not. I consider myself to be pretty fortunate in having a family that's immediately there, but we can each have our own rooms. But some people are working or living on top of each other, and they become more isolated because they don't really engage properly with anybody about their immediate outside of their immediate sphere.
And there's something that you've touched on there that leads us to the question of stigma, and both stigma within Adlands, where the culture's improved massively, but not across all organizations. Yeah. And also the stigma in the male community as well, where lots of men, unfortunately and understandably, find it very difficult to talk about their mental health openly, and they feel as though they're going to be judged or misunderstood. So addressing those two kind of areas, what's your kind of reaction to that and your encouragement to men, especially men in Adland, who are starting to worry about their mental health and want to reach out for help?
So I think there's probably 2 or 3 things to observe about that. One, if you or one is observing friends or something, you think, well, it's not too good or whatever. I think you can ask them simple questions that get an engagement. Have you been through a walk recently? Would you like to go for a walk? Do something pretty practical rather than, you're in a bad headspace or something like that. That's important to talk about that, but it's to get an engagement. I think, also the fact that obviously you NABS have helplines and stuff. If you start to feel about the need to have those conversations, well, I think the helplines are brilliant because you can preserve your anonymity there. You don't have to tell people who may or may not know you about your feelings of that, and it helps. I think it's really important to get a conversation going. Really important to get a conversation going. NABS helpline, mind, and I think that people who are aware, I do feel that I've got a responsibility to say to my friends, my mates, you're right. You're getting out. Do you want to go for a bike ride? I mean, up till today, do you want to have a cup of tea in the garden? Stuff like that. What bands have you listened to recently? What are you doing? But I think it's important that people do it in a very simple but a really engaged way. Not like the introduction to the Zoom meeting. Have a good weekend, and you think, oh, did you? I mean, the classic was, I was once asked if I had, a good Christmas, and it was about 2 months later. But it's kind of have a real engagement with people, because I think even though we've now got used to having that contact through Zoom, but you can still see whether people are interested in you, straight away. And I think that overriding, if you want to help people, do it at a simple level and do it with real interest, stroke concern, depending on the depth of what you feel your friends are going through or colleagues.
I think regarding the NABS advice line, we really regard it as a safe space. So, if you have got any trepidation about exploring what might be going on for you, then it's a great place to call, because the team are so non-judgmental and empathetic, and they're not going to tell you what to do. They will just listen, and you can safely explore in confidentiality what might be going on. And if that takes 10 conversations or 20 conversations, that's fine. There's no rush, as long as you say, you get that conversation going. The other thing that I was interested in is you take that responsibility as a colleague or a friend to say, or would you like to go for a walk, or have you listened to any good music? Then if you start to see there is something going on for this person, how can you encourage them to seek help without taking on so much responsibility for yourself that isn't necessarily yours to take?
Your problem. Yeah, well, I think, obviously those helplines, but, I think at some stage I'll probably say, have you seen anybody medically or because, there are certain behavioral things, maybe the tiredness or, some other physical manifestation of a mental condition, as in that withdrawal. I mean, I do think you can say to people seeking professional advice without, immediately they think, oh, there's a stigma attached to it, because, particularly, I'm a great believer, you've probably covered by now, in identifying this tiredness thing, and also maybe the withdrawal thing. People are entitled to say, well, that's maybe not quite where I should be at. I'd like to discuss it with somebody professionally. I wouldn't have a hesitation in doing that if I felt it. And, if people say, well, I think now you need to see, somebody back, a professional person, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because the thing is really to understand that you do feel this feeling of isolation. I'm the only person to have ever felt that everything that goes wrong in the world is my fault. Well, that's just not the case. And I think that once that you get into a conversation where you can say, these are my feelings and stuff, in my case, as for today, I found that immediately very helpful, very cathartic. I don't know what percentage of the problem was in the process of being cured or being helped by doing that, but I feel it was a significant percentage.
And
so,
we have thousands of people calling us every year, literally thousands. So people are absolutely not alone if they're going through a challenge that they need to address.
No, not at all. And, I do think you referred several times to stigma and all that kind of stuff. The way I said it to you, you've got the helplines, but if you do think that it needs professional advice, if you had a suspected broken ankle, or you were limping and you'd not been diagnosed, you'd have no hesitation in seeking professional help. And if you're feeling under par mentally, or this lethargy or exhaustion, or an inability to keep things balanced, then you're entitled to see somebody, about that and chat to it. I mean, I think that there is a difference, quite honestly, Louise. I'm reluctant to use those analogies, because if you're limping, you've got a very physical manifestation of something not being quite right. Whereas, because mental issues are mostly internalized, that's a bit harder to, see. But it's to get people to get into that frame of mind. If you had toothache, you go off to the dentist, if you're not feeling on top of your game mentally, you you should look at it in that way, and then you would naturally use a helpline, and then you'd make out some kind of process to get some treatment, and therefore the support of friends and family is important. But it is to all I can do in that circumstance, and I say I hope something resonates, is to have a stigma is not unusual, or feel there is a stigma attached, but the sooner you can feel that you can rid yourself of that kind of thing. And as I say, I find very helpful to think of it, well, I've got 2 dodgy knees, I've also got a mental condition. Well, that's part of being Chris Hayward. That's it.
Sure. If we're looking to kind of sell the benefits of speaking out and seeking treatment, let's look at how your life is now.
Well, I feel myself to be very, very lucky. I really have magnificent support from all my friends. My family are just amazing. People, I think I've talked about this now pretty openly for the last 6-7 years. I mean, indeed, where I am now is because I was speaking to a couple of great mates from the Daily Telegraph, and we were having quite a casual lunch, and they said, "Go on, tell us what happened." So I told them, and they were both pretty moved. And they both said, "You have got to get in touch with NABS, and you've got to say, I'm very happy to use my experience to try and help others." So that's where I am. I've got people looking out for me, and the thing is, I don't take it for granted, but I do find myself, as last week when I was something, why are you thinking about this? Right. Don't. That is the thing not to do. CBT. It's like, okay, what's wrong? Why are you feeling tired? It's okay, Chris. Everybody's feeling tired. Everybody's fed up with, the repetitive nature of lockdown. So do as much exercise, go to places for your bike rides that you really love, and listen to music that you really love, and that's all you need to be doing this week. And it doesn't have an immediate effect, but I tell you, 2 to 3 days later, I'm in a much happier frame of mind and feeling relaxed about the world.
And I actually feel much calmer now listening to you say, "Oh, it's all right. It's all right, Chris. It's okay that you feel tired. Everyone's a bit fed up at the moment." Just that sense of being really intuitive, but being really kind to yourself as well, and having the space to do that can be transformative.
Well, it is, because, I think going back to, you said about advertising as well, and, that's why colleagues, obviously, you then can't be taking on total responsibility for then what happens after that. But I think, I've mentioned before, I think that, the leaders of agencies and stuff, they do have the duty of care to their staff from the point of view showing genuine interest and care for their staff's mental well-being, because I think that they need, they lead by example. So showing interest. What did you do at the weekend? Oh, that's good. Was it a nice walk? And showing some of that. But also giving their staff permission to think about themselves. You can switch off from, doing that pitch document or whatever. You can actually permit yourself an hour in the day where what you will do is read your favorite book or whatever it is that you like doing, and really saying to them, well, you can do that because actually in the long run, you know, that's the best thing for everybody. You know, people who are working in an anxious state, you know, do not produce good work. I'm pretty, people who work in a tired state do not produce work. But people who are feeling imbalanced with themselves, they will produce good work. I think that's secondary, but it's that genuine thing. There is a definite positivity about adopting a concerned approach to, you know, the staff for which those bosses are responsible and the people around you. You know, and I don't think it's actually hard to do to convey a genuine interest.
So your message for employers in Adland is then to convey that genuine interest and to encourage people to set boundaries between work and non-work time and to take that time to relax. There will be some employers who are already doing that. There will be some that have work to do. What would you say to anyone working in a team where perhaps they're not supported in that way and they're still doing those 72-hour long pitches and then being expected to come to work the next day at 8 a.m?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, obviously it's something that needs to be discussed, actually, you know, either with their, you know, with their colleagues and groups, or with, you know, human resources, or, but something needs to be done about it. And, you know, it's up to themselves if they get no joy out of their bosses. But all I can say to them is absolutely critical that people who are aware of this do create, you know, sometimes you just got to stick up for yourself, quite honestly, and say, well, no, you know, I am not working 72 hours without a break. I mean, I actually believe I'm one of those people who, when I was in that high position, avoided as much as I can in getting people to make tired decisions and tired work. I mean, that's a different thing, I know, Louise, but I so don't believe in that whole thing of, you know, where, you know, if you're not tired, then you're not working hard. I think there is a way of doing things such that you're feeling, you know, physically in a good you know, a state of well-being, mentally in a state of well-being, and, you know, that I think means that your work will be good. I think, you know, I could just go back to the body. If you think that somebody working 4 days on the trot and they're under immense pressure and there's deadlines and there's stuff coming out at the end of it, that person is the same person at the end of that 4 or 5 day period. Well, they're not. You know, you need to be taking a close look at how you're conducting and providing leadership to those people, because let's face it, everybody knows that, you know, you take on the characteristics, I think, in the way you approach work and professionally from those leaders. And, you know, you can set up days, you can get people in and all that kind of stuff. But I do think when it comes down to it, it's the example that they set to their teams, that really those teams, if they can see that, you know, oh, he's just called in the recruit from the last 6 weeks, and he's, you know, or she having a coffee with them and stuff like that. That kind of indicates a genuine interest in those people. You know, it needs to go well beyond, oh, I'm going to set up a day of people talking to you about mental health. That's good in itself, but you need to make sure that you yourself learn the lessons from that type of thing, and then you display them in front. I'm very open about it as well. You're right. So what did you do? Well, you know, be brave enough sometimes, if somebody has been working 3 or 4 days on the trot, say, right, I really appreciate it. Say thank you. Always remember to say thank you. Really appreciate your effort. But, do you know what? Do something for yourself tomorrow, or, all those type of things. But lead by example, not by, glibly ticking a box.
It's something that we talk about so much at NABS, about empathetic leadership and leadership that sets the tone from the top and kind of walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So especially through lockdown, so I'll use the example of working parents because I'm one myself. Our senior leaders who were working parents would have their kids on the calls because everyone was at home, breastfeeding on the calls, kids clambering up, whichever working parent we're talking about. So then people across the organisation in that position knew that it was okay, and that in order for us to feel as okay as we could be and not feel an extra pressure of trying to keep the kids away from us, that they could come and sit on our laps while we were having a Zoom meeting. So when you're demonstrating as a leader that you are kind of doing what you need to do to support your well-being, that's everything. And equally, as a senior leader, as you have done, if you've had mental health challenges and you're really open about going to get that support and what that looked like for you, then other people will feel empowered to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not saying that those leaders take the total responsibility for everything. But I think that, given what we're talking about and the environment in which this talk will be displayed, certainly the message does have to go out to the leaders to take proper concern. And I would actually say to them, well, in my day, we didn't do anything like that, all that kind of stuff. God bless us. You hear all that kind of stuff. It's not a justification for continuing bad practice, by the way. But, it's kind of, so if you continue like this, I'm absolutely convinced two things will happen. You will have poor quality of work and you'll have a massive turnover of staff.
And that's something we really struggle with in Adland as well. We've got a 30% churn rate, which is twice the national average.
Yeah. I think I think it's it's the right thing to say in this environment, but I'm always wary in talking outside of certain organizations like this, that advertising is a particular case. I think advertising is a case where these things become more marked, and the disparity between a good boss and a bad boss is ever more apparent. But it is things to address, because I think it's a very, I loved it. I absolutely loved being in charge of media buying at Zenith. But then one of the decisions I took after that, I couldn't do that and keep up the physical regime that was required to keep me mobile, basically. So that had to go. But I loved it. But then I do think maybe the leaders need proper help, guidance in trying to establish what that balance point is, because all the leaders there will be working on 3 or 4 pitches simultaneously, and I know where all that goes, and the pressure goes downwards. And I'm not saying that is going to disappear, but I do think that a lot of consideration should be given to making sure, well, okay, the quality of work goes out, but then people aren't stepping too close to that tipping point, because there is a tipping point.
That's where the genuine concern that you have mentioned a few times comes in. And so if you're listening to your people and you're showing concern for what they've been up to, and then you get to understand what their challenges are, then you can start to work out some structures to better support people in their mental health.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, NABS, there's a lot more open talk in the last 7 years, well, since I had the accident, than there was before about the mental positioning and proper mental well-being. And I see weeks and days, and I've gone through the various organizations, so I think that's a good thing. And that it is recognised as being a challenge. I don't like problems and issues. I like challenges, and I think the fact that it's on an agenda is a good thing. But I do think that people need to examine their conscience and kind of in terms of, well, am I just providing those days, or do I genuinely provide leadership? And am I actually making sure that the people who work for me so hard have the confidence to say to me that they want me time or whatever it is? But you know, that's all part of that. It's all part of that concern, and you know, and I think there's plenty of work to do, plenty of good bosses out there. But I just say to, you know, anybody who actually says, well, yeah, I'm going to do it, but you know, not really, or half-heartedly, I think, you know, to say to them, think about it in terms of the kind of work that you produce when you're in a good place, the kind of work that you produce when you're dull, tired, you know, just have a think about that, and think about, you know, how you can encourage people to feel relaxed with themselves. Well, that's how I would describe for me, that's my definition of being in a good place mentally, is me being relaxed with myself.
So with that said, and unfortunately this is the last question I could talk to you today, but we are at the end of our chat. What's one practical way today, right now, that we can all start to better support our mental health?
One, I think it is to look at those people around you, and if you do have any kind of concern about them, do just somehow make contact with them, either through a phone call or a Zoom, say, you're all right, you know, do you want to come out for a walk? Do something practical. I think talking is practical. And, you know, if you go in and exercise, and as for you, you know, so that's an external thing, moving outwards. An internal one is really, having heard this chat, and we've touched on lots of things there, and I hope I've been honest, and it's very clear how these things manifest in my own behavior. If anything resonates there, you know, do not hesitate to use a helpline, you know, and the main thing is to get the conversation started. So that's the one, I would say that's the one piece of practical advice I can give from both angles there, out towards people that you think might be, you know, having some challenges, and back to yourself. Get the conversation started. It's not the cure, but then, you know, the important thing is and as you've highlighted there, Louise, there is definitely a behavioural characteristic in men to internalise the stuff, you know, and it's you know, the mental equivalent of, oh, I'm still going to play 90 minutes of football with a broken leg because that's what blokes do. Yeah, blokes do that, who then, when they come to retire, can't walk properly. So bear that in mind, you know. There are no medals for that to be awarded for that kind of outlook. And if you are feeling like that, start the conversation.
That's such a great note to end on, and just huge thanks, Chris. You've been open and you've been candid. It's your proof that you can have a major mental health challenge wherever you are in your life, but you can then go and get help and get back to a place where you're thriving, which is what you're doing. So, you know, if we're talking about examples on walking the walk and just kind of showing how you support your mental health to make your life just brilliant and enjoyable again, then Chris is definitely someone that we can look towards. So thank you so much, Chris. And some takeaways for me from our chat have been about the importance of practical engagement. So if there's someone in your team that you're feeling concerned about, just reach out to them with a question that is kind of easy but connects with what they're about. So have you listened to this song recently? Or do something practical, like do you want to go for a walk or an outside coffee, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be going in heavy with, have you considered your mental health recently? That is something that you can lead up to if you feel comfortable to do so. And the other thing that stuck out for me is about get the conversation started. The NABS advice line is a great place to do that. It's a safe and confidential space. You may not get the answers in that first initial chat, but you are closer to getting them if you start that conversation. To use Chris's brilliant analogy, do not play football with a broken leg. It will not get you anywhere. You won't win any medals. Instead, reach out and get help, and then you can get back to a place that you're going to be thriving and enjoying your life once more. So huge thanks to Chris. We've mentioned the NABS advice line quite a few times in this chat, and you can find all the details for that on our website, nabs.org.uk, along with details of other ways that you can contact us and other services we have, including a therapy referral service, and we have one-to-one coaching and masterclasses, which are group coaching services, everything designed to help boost your well-being, your mental and emotional health. If you want to find out more about the other things we do too, we do talks as well as speed mentoring. It's all on the website. So it just goes for me to say, again, a huge thanks to Chris. Oh yes, and the other thing to say is we can only exist with your generosity because we are a charity. We need donations to carry on keeping our vital work going. So there are details of how you can get involved as a corporate donor or as an individual on our website as well. Huge thanks to Chris once more. You have been marvellous, open, honest, and inspiring. Thank you for joining us, and have a good Men's Health Week.
Thank you.